Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Friday, the 8th of August. This is our second recorded version of the Friday Focus series. We've been going now for over a year, and thanks to those that are joining us regularly, certainly the feedback that we're getting, people commenting on shows, we know that people are watching them afterwards. So whether you're watching this live or watching this after the broadcast session, thank you for being here, and do get involved in the conversation. We're trying to cover subjects that matter to school leaders and teachers across the globe, and it's my pleasure to welcome my guest for this morning. We're going to change tack very slightly from other conversations we've had. And I welcome from the other side of the globe, from Australia, Bernie Godwin. Welcome to Friday Focus this morning, Bernie.
Hello, thank you, Chris.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Now, the conversation we're going to get into in a moment. I will just say to people, if you're here, you'll be here on LinkedIn or you'll be here on YouTube. Some people will be watching after the broadcast on Spotify and on Substack. If you're there, please get involved in the conversation. We won't be able to respond live to comments, but we will get back to those if you're watching this and you've got something to say. So Bernie, you're welcome to join that conversation as people engage. Now, let me just let you introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing and your journey to this point.
Like you said, I live in Australia. I'm in a little place called Logan, which is in Queensland. And my background really that has brought me into contact with you is through writing the book, Loving Our Students on Purpose. But long before I put pen to paper, I worked as a school social worker in our mostly private system over here, some of our alternative education systems as well. And I worked alongside some of our roughest kids. Logan, where I live, is a very difficult areas. I often say more murders than suicides that I've worked with. And it's been an honor to do 20 years of educating the teachers on how to support students with behaviors when big things happening. And now I'm in private consulting, so I just work alongside schools, helping them to develop new ways of interacting with students and educating their staff and leadership team to respond to some of the most complex problems that come up in schools.
That's an interesting journey, and we share kind of common ground in the sense of working with schools facing challenging circumstances, or that's the term that we use here in the UK. And you refer to your book. So it's a collaboration, isn't it? Tell us a bit about that collaboration.
Yeah, so before Loving Our Students on Purpose was even an idea, Danny Silk wrote the book Loving Our Kids on Purpose, which is a parenting program, and he's gone on to write about 10 other books. And so in my journey in education, I had come across his material quite early on and started to embed it into my practice. And the tools actually made a difference. They were working, and that started getting people asking me, well, what are you doing? And opened the doors for me to share it. And eventually Danny suggested, why don't we write a book together? And so Loving Our Students on Purpose was co-authored to bring together a range of his resources into one specific location with a non-faith lens. His work's very faith-based. Mine is a non-faith lens, so it can go onto every desk in every school in all the world.
And if you haven't grasped that so far, so the book Loving Your Students on Purpose, it's an interesting title, isn't it? I mean, that might seem a little inaccessible to some people, just simply as the start point. Education is about, the mind and the skills and acquisition. That idea of loving students on purpose. Just tell us a little bit about that as a start point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the title's the play on the parenting program, Loving Our Kids on Purpose, but it really acts as a disruptor, and it gets you to stop and like, well, what do you mean? Like, one, we get stuck on the word love so often. What is love? How do we, how are we describing love, defining love within our community? Honestly, I have never met somebody who works in the school system, whether it's the teachers or the aides or even the groundsman and the admin, who doesn't love the students. Like everyone's drawn into education because of love. But then the other part of that phrase, on purpose, the intentionality behind that, it's kind of suggests that we have to make a choice, that there's something that we have to do. And so, yeah, the title, I do get lots of comments about the title. People sometimes turn up to training I'm running just because they're like interested in the title. But it's a disruptor. And, you know, we are in the, like, I'm not an educator. I'm not a teacher. I'm a social worker background and neuroscience. But the journey is still about learning. It's about education. And so I think having a title like Loving Our Students on Purpose gets curiosity piqued, and that allows us to have a dialogue about what is love and what is intentionality, and how do we bring things together as the adults in the room.
It's so important. I remember, you know, in the process of, you know, leading school and interviewing staff, people would often come and say, well, you know, I love my subject. I love what I do. And you know, and they'd say, well, you know, I'm here to teach my subject. And the challenge, you know, me and others that were with me, you know, would ask of staff, you know, well, okay, so what about this? Because you're not here to teach your subject. You're actually here to teach children. You might love your subject, but you do need to love children, and you need to, you know, and sadly, I have heard in my experience of leading schools over the years, people say, well, I hate kids. My response to that is, well, what on earth are you doing in teaching? Because
in the wrong profession.
You go and, you know, go and lecture or go and do something. Not to say that that's anything less than teaching. I mean, I personally love the process, and that's why I still do it after all these years. And I'm not in the classroom, but you've got to love children. You've got to love being around children. You've got to love the process of learning to really want to do this. Surely that to me is fundamental.
I think that's fundamental to staff well-being, because if we're in a place where we're surrounded by people we don't enjoy, our own physical well-being is going to suffer, let alone the students who love is fundamental to opening up their minds and feeling like they're belonging and connected to something. And so I don't think you can really even start learning curriculum until we've understood and unpacked the love that is between humans. It doesn't have to be like there's different types of love. We're just talking about a healthy, platonic, shared experience. I love being in your presence. I love listening to what you have to say. I love that you turned up to the class today. I've been looking forward to seeing you. These are basic to opening the doorway for learning.
Absolutely. And that inquisitiveness and that inquiry comes from fascination, doesn't it? It comes from that core, I want to, I need to, this is feeding me. I need to grow. So it's a fascinating start point, and I can see how people would respond to that. So I know you've been in school today, and I'm not going to ask you where you've been, but I know you've been traveling to school, and you travel widely. What does it look like when schools engage with you and this process of getting to loving the students on purpose? What does it look like?
Well, initially, I would say it's very messy, because, you know, when we start this process of unpacking core beliefs, it's really about being honest and looking at what we believe to be true, and then deciding, do we still want to believe that? And for some people, that could be really confronting. So the journey we would walk on would generally start with a small executive team, and we would work with the leadership to equip them with the skills, not only to reflect on their own core beliefs and how that's impacting the way they interact with one another, their colleagues, you know, and the students and parents. And then we can equip them with the skills to lead their middle leaders to be able to develop that same confidence. And then from there, they will lead their teaching staff, and then, you know, so on, until finally we get to the students. But we're not actually going after the students or the change of behavior. We're actually going after the heart of our belief systems as adults. And what do we want to do about them? Let's get intentional, because love is not dependent on what a student does or how they perform, what they say or do each day. Love is actually a dependent factor on a choice that I make. And I often talk to our teachers here, if one of my very first stories I'll use in education when I'm meeting staff for the first time is this idea that, every single person I'm talking to at some point at least applied to work at that school. So they may have been a teacher, they might have applied to go to university, they might have applied to do a teaching degree, and then they've applied to maybe work at 3 schools, and they finally applied to work at this school. And they made a decision. If they can think back to the day they put in their application, they made a decision they were going to work at the school, and they were going to actually enjoy all these students, and the students were going to enjoy them, and they were looking forward to it with great anticipation. And then they turned up for the first day and it was okay. But by week 3, they're questioning their decision. Like, did I really choose these kids? Like, did I really love them? Can I turn that switch off and not love them? And now I can just be curriculum. And so it really starts with questioning some of those core beliefs. And do we have permission to turn our love off? Or is it a choice that I get to control? And on a good day, I do that really well. And let's be honest, not every day is a good day. And so that's where it can be a little messy as we explore what are we going to do in those times where we're not managing well, or our students aren't managing well, or our parents not managing themselves well.
I just listening to you, Bernie, I'm reflecting on decision as a teacher. Why did I choose certain schools? And I remember driving past one school when I was working at another school. And I knew the area. It wasn't far from where I lived. I just, in me inside, I'd love to teach there. I'd love to work with those children. I'd love to work with that team. I just that, you make me reflect on that journey of, and the reality is, we all make that decision, don't we? I want to work in that environment. I want to be with those people. There's something there that's going to make me grow, going to make me challenged. I can participate in, and I can work with these people. That's a great place to begin, because it's not often where, we have this idea that teachers are generic beings and it doesn't matter where they go. But we do have those sensibilities, don't we?
Yeah, and I think, it would be very unusual for someone to start out in the early days of teaching without a love, at least for wanting the students to connect with them and wanting to connect with their students. I genuinely believe that teachers particularly, but staff in schools, are there because they want to help and they want to nurture and they want to educate and teach. But in the journey of that and the disappointments that come when we can't control these little people, or we can't control, the teacher in the room next door, or, then we start to get discouraged and disillusioned. And that's where we start putting up our defenses and operating out of the fear paradigm, trying to control, manipulate, punish to help us feel more comfortable, more in control. But I do think we usually, I haven't come across any teachers myself who haven't initially, if you get to the early story, really wanted to love on students. But there's many environments and nations around the world where you don't even need a teaching degree to teach. You just need to be a warm body. And so sometimes it is just a job. And so being honest with yourself about the reason why you're there, your purpose behind that is going to make or break, the joy that you're going to have that day.
And that's an important point and intro. Obviously in the UK and other nations, you can't teach as a qualified teacher without that training. But that isn't the case everywhere around the world. I know certainly, leaders that I talk to, in various parts of the world, are dealing with people that are not professional teachers. They're people, as you say, they must have reason beyond just being a warm body and a paycheck. It's got to be more than that. But it is, this is the characteristics of being in a room with a number of learners and the right why you're doing what you're doing. Look, you referred to it there because I know you talk about it a lot, and you referred to the fear paradigm and kind of moving to that. You talk about this challenging the punishment paradigm. Tell us just a little bit more about that, because that's I hear so many people, certainly in UK. I was teaching when we lost the. We got to that point where we lost the corporal punishment element, and I personally believe that was the right thing. When people say to me, let's bring back corporal punishment, my answer is no, that's not the answer. Behavior is not about control and limits, and there's more to it than that. And I
Mhm.
saw some abuses that I'm not going to recount here, but there's a good reason why corporal punishment was stopped. But you've written about this idea of the punishment paradigm from your professional position. Just tell us a bit about that and why that makes a difference.
Yeah, so the punishment paradigm was initially part of Danny's work that he contributed, and it's really a cycle. So if you think of a circle, it goes fear, control, failure, punishment. So maybe, we're afraid of losing control of the class, we're afraid of how the students are going to react. So we start to try and control the environment. We might threaten, we might do seating plans, we might, do things to feel like our comfort is soothed because we're trying to protect ourselves. And of course, it doesn't work. So we fail. And then we have this strong sense of I tried everything and it doesn't work. And then that sense of punishment of either I'm a failure or the leadership team's not doing anything, or this child needs to be punished because I feel ashamed, because there's this internal experience happening, which leads us to confirm that we were right to be afraid all the time, back to fear. And so we just try harder to control. And then we try, we go back around that circle: fear, control, failure, punishment. And we never really get this invitation to step out of that. I think this idea, I remember the days of corporal punishment. I'm a little bit older than I looked. I was at school when the cane was around. And, I was the good student who was terrified of getting the cane. I remember day one of my interview in grade 1, going to meet the principal for my interview, and he opened the cupboard. It was like, here's the cane. Like, I will use it. And from that moment on, I was performance, perfection. I was afraid of my own shadow. And I think I have spent over 40 years unpacking the hurt and that I had just shoved down so deep that I didn't even take risks in my own life. And I think sometimes we think that we're helping kids or we're changing kids' behavior because they eventually learn how to comply out of self-preservation and self-protection. Or the opposite happens. They're like, I'm so messy, I'm not even going to bother complying. They just get worse and they rebel. But I think, when we think about corporal punishment, it's as funny as, I went to this birthday party not long ago. It was for a toddler, like maybe 3 years old. And, it's charged with cake and sugar, and all the kids are like full of excitement, and we're doing presents. And so this girl is opening her presents, and one of the other children touched her toy. And so this girl turns around and just decked her, just pushed her over, gave a little punch. And the mother grabs this girl's hand and smacks her, says, "We don't hit people." I'm like, oh, well, that's behavior management 101. We do the very thing we're telling our kids not to do, and then we're shocked when they keep doing what we're role modeling to them. I think if anything's going to change, it's got to start with us and start looking at a new way. And so the invitation is to move away from the punishment paradigm and into what we refer to as the connection paradigm, which is love, freedom, and choices. Love requires freedom. Freedom can only exist if we have choices, and one of those choices is love. Now, I don't get to decide if you will choose connection with me. I don't get to decide if you'll choose disconnection with me. I get to decide what I do with me in light of the situation. And if it doesn't have the hope for restoration and reconnection, then it's not love. And you can't have both in an environment. You can't have just this little bit of fear and love. It's one or the other. And I think every day we have to make an intentional choice, and it's almost quite a confronting, exhausting choice at first to choose connection over fear.
Yeah. I just listening, Bernie. I just remember I was working in a school in London, and it was a challenging school. It was, that there were children who were struggling with that compliance side.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to go into a maths classroom, and there's this little young lad who was just bouncing off the walls. He couldn't sit down, and the teacher was saying, "You've got to deal with it." And obviously, I was there in the capacity of a senior leader. I was working in a sort of a short-term contract with them, and I remember looking at the lad and thinking, "Do you know, it's got nothing to do with this room. What's gone on?" So I asked his teaching assistant just to check in his bag. And as they opened the bag, there was a litre bottle of orange fizzy drink and a kilogram bar of chocolate, of which he'd drunk 3/4 of the orange and about half of the chocolate. And you could see it exactly as you've just described the birthday party. His body was just full of sugar. He couldn't cope with himself. He didn't know how to sit still. So the teachers shouting, control him, deal with him, punish him.
Just escalating him more.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's going to. So I would say to the TA, would you just work with me? Just invite him to come out with you and just go and run around the field. Just go and get some fresh air and let him wear off some of the sugar. And 20 minutes later, he walked back chatting away as cooperative as ever, sat down and got on with the lesson. But in that, I can hear what you're saying, and in a sense, and this is my question: there are some people that get it, and there are some people that respond to it, and there are some people that are still in that paradigm of this is wrong, this is not compliant, punish it. How do you shape the conversation with people that are in that mindset to see another way? What's the process you go through to open the door to another view?
I mean, that's a loaded question. The journey I would take
to me, but
that's a great question. The journey I'd take, if I'm working with a group on, is we'd go and look for the early adopters, the ones who either are already carrying the culture that you want to envision. You're like, everybody, they're ahead, let's follow them. And then the ones who are undecided but open. And that's where I concentrate my efforts. I would rarely go into a school and focus on those who are not interested. And they're in every school, even a school that's fully integrated behavior education effectively. They still have staff there who actually don't want behavior education because they like the environment. They like teaching in an environment where they're treated respectfully. And so, they're always going to be attracted to those spaces. But the goal would be to focus on those who are really ahead of the game, who are living it, breathing it, talking about it. And those people who are not on board, they slowly just seem to pick up the language. Then they start to pick up some of the techniques, and they might only be doing it at half as well as maybe some of the others. But some of the people who have been quite vocally against the idea of behavior education in my journey have become some of my biggest supporters, because it's like they accidentally got on the train and then they realized one day and they couldn't get off. It was moving too fast. Yeah. But I wouldn't say that's the case for everyone. Some just leave the school. And I've seen that many times. As you take a school on a journey, some people will be attracted to the school for the program or for the philosophy that they're espousing, and others will go, I want to go to a school that's all about rules and rigidity and compliance, and they're happy to stay in that environment. And there's plenty of schools on offer for that.
That's a good point, Bernie. And I know that because within England, there's been quite a lot of debate about this compliance, zero tolerance. That kind of idea of compliance is the answer, and if you comply, you sit quietly, you do as you're told. If you don't fit that mode, go somewhere else. And here we might call that encouragement off rolling. So schools are have been criticized for that process.
Yeah, handball the child to someone else. Yeah, but you know what? When we think about compliance, I mean, since I became an adult, I started to really notice every staff meeting I went to, every workplace I've been in, the adults aren't compliant. I mean, I drive along the road and I notice people on their phones or speeding or not stopping at a stop sign. Adults are not compliant. And I don't think that's a realistic goal. I think of compliance as like a unicorn, like we're chasing an idea of something that we're never, ever going to catch. And to expect kids to be compliant when adults aren't is quite a strange idea to me. What we want is to create a social norm where we want to be able to protect each other, to connect with each other, to be kind towards each other. But you know what? Sometimes doing that doesn't look like straight, clear compliance. And certainly if we look at the neural developmental process that's going on for young people all the way to post age 30, that they're going to be making a lot of mistakes as they figure out who they want to be and how they want to be and what are their needs and how to get the needs met, by referring to all these primal instincts that they picked up in their early years of infancy. And so to be able to come along as an adult post 30 and say, well, this is my way is the right way, you all need to behave like this, to me, that sounds like a dictatorship in its strictest form. And it's going to lead to perfectionism and rebellion, because that's what it happens in those environments. But equally so, I want to be really clear for your listeners. If we only have relationship, if it's all connection and it's all well-being and it's all trauma-informed practice, and we're not creating a space that has rules and responsibilities and expectations, and we're not focused at all on that half of the polarity, then we get chaos. And in Australia, a lot of the phrases that's kind of coming out in the media now is the well-being trap, because the chaos in the classroom has come about because the teachers don't know when they can say no, and the schools don't know if they can expel and if that would actually be okay or not. And so I guess I encourage schools to look at it from a perspective that it's not either or, it's both and how, as a leadership team, do we ride the polarity rather than trying to be one over the other.
That's really important, and because in our conversation the other day, that we talked about that exclusion route, and the acknowledgement that in your environment, you're saying that there's a kind of a point at which we recognize this environment isn't working, and we need to find something that does work. That's part of what you're describing, loving the children on purpose, loving the students on purpose. You're coming to a point of it's well-being that we're centered on. We're going to move you to a place that's better suited to your rather than an exclusion mindset it's not working, go away.
And it's done out of love, not fear. So it's not I'm getting rid of you. In fact, this is a huge conversation just on exclusions and how to do them effectively and well, and there shouldn't be many of them. But if we're doing it out of love, it's not uncommon for the staff to actually be crying. Be like, we really want you here. I'll be vulnerable. This is in the UK, so I've got lots of protection happening. My son went through this process. My stepson got excluded from a school that he was at, and I was their external consultant for his school, walking them through how to develop behavior education. And then here is my stepson who starts escalating his behavior significantly. And I'm now the person walking the principal and the exec team through the process of how to suspend well, how to guide the behavior education well. And eventually it got to the point where I was guiding them how to expel. So I'm like giving them all the information, and then my husband's going into the next meeting and they're talking him through the expulsion. And I don't say that to I guess I've been doing this for such a long time. What I know is when it's done well and right, it will promote that child into their best life. And, that school has come back within weeks. They came back and said, you can re-enroll anytime. We're ready to have you back. We've seen the action that not just we took as parents, but that he took. But my son is now in an environment where he is thriving, and we would never have made that choice without the right process that we had been led through. And so to see him go from D's and poor self-esteem and violence to he's an A student, he's best life, big smiles, loving life. I've just seen that work so many times. However, it's an incredibly rare skill for staff to develop on how to take students on that journey and parents on the journey with love. So they're not getting rid of them out of fear, or we don't know how to handle you. It's done in collaboration and it's done with love.
That's a really, thank you. I know how sensitive that is when it's your own. But I was asking the question. Obviously in the English system and actually the UK system, it's often that the exclusion is the kind of point scoring element that gets access to the next thing, which so an alternative provision can only happen if they've been excluded from the mainstream provision. Where we're talking about something that in the Australian system, it might be we need to find the right facility, the right environment, the right institution. That's probably the wrong word, but the right
I know what you're saying. Here you don't have to be excluded to access a range of schooling options, but I think for some of those alternative systems, they could be very damaging for a child. And so, again, this comes back to parent education. If I was working as a school social worker, walking alongside a student and a parent, maybe towards potential expulsion, it's always done in a way that they're fully aware that what is happening right now is no longer conducive for the safety of others. And we want you at the school. This is what it looks like for you to stay. We've gone 1,000 rounds with you, but now it doesn't look like, you're wanting to be in this environment. And I remember doing this with one girl. She left, she went to the local state school, and the next day she came and re-enrolled. Like, it's, students just sometimes want to try something else. We had another boy in primary school who was very, very violent. And eventually we got to the place where we had tried every tool and technique. We'd referred to support. You can get support like whether it's pediatrician and psychology and assessment and externalized teams, and all of that had come in. And then we got to the point where we did ask them to leave. And a couple of weeks at their new school, the parent comes back and is like, oh, he just got punched in the face and it's the best thing that ever happened to him. But he was never going to be in that situation at our school because we had a very non-contact school, which is why he stood out. And so I think sometimes it's knowing your school, knowing, what the client, what the students are like, what the parents are like, and taking them on a journey. Because, not all schools will be highly behavior education focused initially. But if you've got a school that's gone on the journey for over 13 years, then you will have an environment where every kid in the school is raised to think responsibly for themselves, and not self-regulation, but probably co-regulation at that age is instinctual. So they know how to go and find a teacher to co-regulate with, and the teachers know how to co-regulate back. And, that creates some golden moments, but not all students will find that safe. Yeah. Because the brain's obviously not going to go, oh, well, I feel safe in this quiet environment if I'm raised in an abusive environment, because love might feel like abuse. So I'm going to escalate the behaviors. And so I think it's not as simple as, is there a process? Humans are so complex, and the neurobiology that we all experience is so complex. And so it's not just about the kids. Every teacher aide, every admin worker, like they're dealing with their own physical reactions every day as well. And so it's all colliding into one very small area with lots and lots of people. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that's about recognizing the character of my own organization as a leader. What is it? And everything you're saying comes back to understanding our core purpose and our vision for the environment, and working that through in reality means practices. You've referred to trauma-informed practice. So we train staff to be aware of that as they're engaged in their teaching professionalism. That's. I'm just going to pause for a second, Bernie, and then we'll come back on this conversation if that's okay. Just 1 second. So thank you for being with us. I will encourage you to like, share, and follow us, or subscribe depending on where you're watching us. We're on LinkedIn and YouTube. That's probably where you're seeing us if you're working with us live. If you're following up afterwards on Substack and on Spotify, please engage in the conversation. We are speaking to people across the world about issues that matter within the education sphere. Please engage in the conversation if you're able to. If you've got a comment or a question, or you want to engage with the guests that we're speaking to. There's many more to follow during the summer. We are recording sessions, so they won't be live during the summer break. So we get a break as well as the break that you're taking. But please do engage with us and get involved in the conversation. So, Bernie, that just that last point, about sort of training staff, and you're engaged in that program. So what does the training look like? So when you're working with this, I mean, you're talking about working with the executive team and the leadership team, and that kind of, we ended that conversation a moment ago with that view of purpose and practice.
how does that, I mean, are you working in a classroom with teachers and looking at sort of a peer activity, or is it sort of lecture style activity? What does the training, how do you get into the mind of the teacher in that?
Well, we would do a range of different services because I think different people do learn in different ways. Most of the time I come into a school, they've already read Loving Your Students on Purpose, they've already done the book club, and so they've got some foundational knowledge, both of the philosophy and some of the tools and strategies that we recommend. But when we start the deep work, it's a reflective journey. So there would be a huge amount of it is, I guess you would say, teaching style. It's very education based. And then the reflective part is, some of it is like shared, like in a group, but some of it would be one-on-one work. So some significant coaching with the key leaders. We call them key leader consults, just so that they're in a safe place to be honest about some of their core beliefs and just to dispel some of the myths that they've held on to for so long and wrestle with what they want to believe now. I think, when we're shifting behavior, whether it's with an adult or with a child, I like the idea that it's almost like if you were to draw a triangle and then one's got the little angle part and then there's the one little side all on lonesome on the other side. At the top, we've got the principle, the thing that we want somebody to learn. Well, why is this relevant to you? Whether it's, not talking in class or getting your report cards written on time or parking in the right place. Whatever it is that we want it to become relevant. So we're having conversations in an environment where people feel safe enough to consider, how's this relevant to me? Just like we've been talking, like, oh, that's taken me back to this time. It's now relevant. The next step we often jump straight into is, well, now it's relevant. Let's go straight to behavior change. So on that little side where it's just one arrow, it's principle to behavior. And so we think, well, you shouldn't talk in class, shut your mouth. That's the practice. And then it lasts for like 10 seconds and they bounce back to talking in class or whatever it is. And so if you look at the other side of this triangle where it goes from principle down to the other point, which is a paradigm, our core belief, then we can start questioning, well, what do I believe to be true? And if through dialogue, whether it's some group work sessions, whether it's one-on-one sessions, sometimes on occasion it could be whole staff PD, but that's less common. There's a revelation, like, how's this relevant to me? And oh my gosh, I used to believe this and now I want to believe this. As we shift our core belief, which people don't like the word, but essentially it's repentance. I've come to a place where I think I was wrong and I want to try something new. The behavior just changes, because out of the new belief system, we automatically change our behavior. So if the principle was, let's not talk in class because it's now relevant to me because I love my friends and they are going to, they're in high school and they're wanting to be doctors and they really need to focus on their math. So I actually care about their goals and I've noticed they care about mine. So now my belief system, which is, maths is boring, I don't really enjoy it, goes, oh, my belief system is I'm on my friend's team. I really want them to achieve really well. And you know what? They're cheering me on. Maybe maths isn't so bad. I can ask them for help. And from this perspective of, I like maths, or I need maths for my future career, straight away behavior shifts. We can't behave out of an old paradigm if we shift it. But that journey, it can be confronting for people, which is why it can really depend on whether it's a group, one-on-one, or big group at large.
And that's, you make a clear point so poignantly. There's something there about, I'm not going to center on, use the word repentance, but that idea that, look, this isn't working. What I believe seems not to be true, and I need to change what I believe about it. So if silent classrooms is supposed to bring lots of activity and lots of learning, and it's not working, then maybe that's because interaction is important, or my belief about maths, I don't do maths. I've genuinely been astounded the number of school leaders that I have worked with. We did some the other day, about 450 over the last few years. The number of them that say to me, Chris, I don't do maths. I'm into text. I write. I'm an English or history specialist. I don't do maths. And it kind of, you get down into they genuinely believe they can't do it.
Because it's that sense of discomfort, it's fear.
Yeah. Yeah, so changing the paradigm, changing that core belief. Not that I can do that in the circumstances necessarily, but it's interesting to see. Well, if I show you what it looks like, and oh, well, okay, so it's not so impenetrable, and I can do number, and but we understand that. But how important is that for young people in learning, and what do they
incredibly.
believe? Yeah.
I mean, what you're talking about is what all the applied neuroscience that is just flooding, social media and school conferences at the moment, and so it should, is this idea that we need to feel safe to learn. And so for us to switch our brain on and to be ready to put our momentum towards learning instead of our momentum to fight or flight requires us to be in an environment that feels safe.
Yeah.
And so, the only place where we can reflect on our core beliefs is I think it's more than safety, it's intimacy, which again is another one of those really uncomfortable, disrupting words. And intimacy is essentially, it's not learning in the sense, so learning in the vagal system occurs when you're in a safe place, the same as fight flight would occur in a fear place. So intimacy, or the willingness to look deep within ourselves and change a core belief, requires so much intimacy, so much vulnerability, that it's the same vagal network happening in your body as the freeze response. So it's just the safe, loving environment. And so, like, the best example of where you would experience intimacy on a day-to-day basis is, you go home, you sit on the couch with your spouse at the end of the day, and you have this sigh, and you just kind of know, you just have a knowing between you. That's what they call the vagal brake going up. And so you're pulling this brake and you're slowing everything down, and you're moving out of momentum and you're going into slowing down. So you're braking. And we need to create environments that aren't just fast-paced, go, 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 even in safe places, and create opportunities to slow down and to feel vulnerable. And unfortunately, vulnerability is so uncomfortable. I mean, Brene Brown's made a whole, movement around shame and recognizing that vulnerability is just so important. But if we don't teach our children how to be vulnerable, then they become adults who can't be vulnerable. And those adults are teaching our grandchildren. And so the cycle is just repeating itself.
Yeah. I mean, there's such deep and important stuff here in that, but just that sense of, as a teacher, how can I create a safe space so learning can happen? It comes back to the beginning, loving our students on purpose. That's what you're saying. And I guess that's really, kind of in the round, we've got to the kind of center of why Danny Silk talks about that, why you've shaped it in terms of school. I just, that sense of, I don't know, there's this big debate in England at the moment in terms of curriculum review and what is it and how do we measure it and whatever. But actually, as a trust director, so I'm part of a multi-academy trust, and we, all of our staff are trained in TPP, we call it here, but trauma-informed practice. I was listening to some other podcasts, and they, so there's some great ones on ADHD saying, this isn't happening widely. But I know our staff are, and it's important that they do. They know, they respond to children with that perception of, if this child is vulnerable, if this child has some experienced trauma, then they need to feel safe before we can do anything. That's it. It's so important.
Well, and equally is the myth that trauma only happens to kids.
Yes,
because all of our teachers are living, breathing experiences of life, and they might not be impacted by trauma, though many of them are. And trauma-informed practice might lead some to think they are, actually living trauma when they're not. But essentially, like, they have vagal systems, they have brains that are interacting in the classroom too. And so they need tools to manage themselves whilst the children are living life and learning in front of them. Otherwise, there's so often, instead of co-regulation, we get this co-escalation. And, we start to partner. And your story at the beginning about the boy who had all this sugar, but then the teacher was escalating and then he's escalating. And, the science is pretty accurate. 20 minutes, you said it took him to go for a run and a walk. 20 minutes is the minimum you need to de-escalate once your brain has entered the fight-flight mode. And so that's pretty standard normal. And yet teachers want their kids back in class. Like, if, let's say a leader comes in, they're like, take them out and get them back ready to learn. And why did you take so long? Why did you have such a long conversation? Well, we needed to wait 20 minutes so they're on the optimal mindset so that we could engage in a reflection, which then took time. So they came back in 40 minutes. And it's almost like a lose-lose situation. Like we just need to create dialogue where we're normalizing what is real experiences. We're naming the myths and the misconceptions, and we're creating some common language that makes it less personal and more about human awareness. And I like the phrase unlocking the power of human connections. Like, how can we make this human so that we can connect with each other, even in the mess, even when it's like uncomfortable, even when I as an adult am feeling really afraid, but I've got tools to manage my fear because I know that you, little person, probably don't.
Just so important. Just to, because a teacher expectation, I've got an hour, I've got 40 minutes, I've got 50 minutes, whatever it is, get them back and get them because I've got to get through this content. But, what we're describing is not just trauma-informed practice, but basic physiology that, my body is reacting in a particular way. My brain has got chemistry that is going to take time to settle. And that's just so important. I mean, that's not to say let's disrupt the whole thing and let anything happen. But you've just got to be real about, if this is escalated, there needs to be de-escalation. There needs to be time. That's so important.
And it doesn't often take a lot of time. I think that if we can learn to catch it early, I have this fantastic video I use when I'm doing training about the amygdala. And it's this enormous snake. And anyone who knows Australia, we have so many snakes. So this thing's bigger than anything we have here. And you see the camera, the tail of the snake, and you're seeing the tail and the tail and the tail and the tail and the tail. And you're never getting the end, the tail and the tail and the tail. And suddenly it strikes and bites the camera. And the whole room, like their amygdalas just get hijacked and they jump. And like, that's so often how we behave in schools. We're reacting to the snake strike. Really, we saw the tail like ages ago. And if we had done something then, we could have prevented the strike. And so it's about that self-awareness for ourselves, for the students, for, I like to say polyvagal responsibility, our ability to manage our vagal system well. And then we can start to get proactive and stop this reactive approach that has permeated our school systems.
Yeah. Well, the truth is that's fed our belief systems so much, and that's where we've got to go back and look at the paradigms that we're building from. We've talked about so many things, and we're coming to the end of the conversation. I did want to say, because I know a lot of people in England will be familiar with the work of Paul Dix. And,
when the adult changes.
When the adults change, everything changes. And I know, we've talked about that. I know Paul did quite a lot of work in Australia, but and his book has gone worldwide.
His book's all over. I don't walk into a school that they don't put both my book and his book in front of me now.
Well, that's a wonderful compliment to both of you.
Yeah.
The reason I asked, or I brought up that one is, good shout out to Paul. I know he's doing other things now, and the teacher radio that he is involved in. And I've known, I've worked with him and recommended him to many schools that I've worked with. But just that sense of change, that because his theme is, we've got to take responsibility and do something to make the environment different if we want things to be different. The old adage of do what we've always done, get what we've always got. That's so we need to do something.
Yeah.
If you could change one thing in terms of the education system, and I know you're focused on the Australian system, but the sense of what you've talked about is global. It's happening.
Yes, and all our schools in other countries, it is. I mean, same with Paul's work. Humans are humans everywhere, and so we all have brains, and they work, and they tell our vagal system how to react and respond. And so it's so important that we have tools. So the question of what would I change, I think it wouldn't matter what country I was in. If I had a magic wand and I could make something disappear, it would be this idea of behavior management. And, behavior management being really, it's an external process. I will manage you. I will take away your freedom. I will make the decisions. I will even take responsibility. And now I'm going to act surprised that I did everything and you didn't change. And so I would just, if I had a magic wand, I would just switch culturally in every culture, every society, our language to behavior education. It's about learning. It's about making mistakes, making messes, and knowing how to reconnect when the messes are made. That's just normal part of the process. And take all the angst out of it. It's not personal, it's learning. And I think behavior education is a much better lens for guiding our students through incremental mistakes that they make across the lifespan.
That's so important, and that just the whole idea of relationship and managing relationship and on that level, it's not, I'm an educator, I'm doing this to you, I'm a human being and I know stuff and I'm doing this with you, is a very different mindset, isn't it? And that's why we say come back to that paradigm.
Yeah, spot on. If we want our students to start operating in a different way, they're going to need to see a model that's different. It's just like the example of the parent who smacked the child's hand earlier and then was like, we don't hit people. I'm like, well, you literally just hit someone to prove your point. We've got to stop doing the very things that we're accusing our students of doing. And I think that adults need to take responsibility. I call it joyful responsibility. It's like you got to dig deep. You'll be really happy to take responsibility for your life, your messes, and cleaning them up. It's not easy and it's vulnerable, and that's why so many people don't want to do it.
And it's the right and wrong mindset. And the reality is that in different organizations you're going to find different ways, and things work in some places and they don't work in others, and that's part of the learning and exploring. But that's inquisitive learning. That's so what is going to work for us, and how is this going to work with this culture and this climate and what's going on,
and what's the journey? Because so often we get fixed mindset in adults. We want the kids to have growth mindset, but we have fixed mindset. So there's a journey in there. Like if this is the culture we're in right now, we're not operating in a way to protect that culture. We want to grow and expand that culture. Where are we heading? We don't necessarily ever just want to stay the same. And so I think that's a part that we can get a little bit stuck on, is there's this goal that we're trying to achieve rather than the journey that we're going on as a team. And if we're going on a journey, it should change and it should look different. And it should continuously change and look different as we grow and evolve and expand our capacity.
Yeah. I look so many things there, Bernie. We could talk for another hour and just go into the. I just want to give you an opportunity. So I know you're podcasting as well. So if people want to find out a little bit more about what you're talking about, how would they? I mean, apart from getting the book, I mean, I'm going to put it on the screen. Loving Your Students on Purpose are here. Bernie Godwin, I'll get the pronunciation right, and Danny Silk, Building a Culture of Joy, Responsibility and Connection. How else would they engage with you, Bernie?
There's actually several ways. We have the podcast, which is only on Spotify at the moment. It's called The Loving Our Students on Purpose Journey. And what I really love about it is every episode is that we unpack a chapter, but with either a principal or a teacher or a social worker, chaplain, somebody who's living and breathing it, some parents. And so we unpack all of the chapters over 12 episodes, and then we start again with new guests. And so that's been really fun to put together. Also on our website, which is Godwin_consulting.com.au. That is a really great place where you can jump on and you can look at our online courses or other resources. One of the things that makes me the most passionate is making it easy and accessible. So, free printable posters and little flashcards that you can use to help remember some of the terminology and phrases is, I think, just putting it in people's hands. And we've got a newsletter as well. So, godwinconsulting.com.au for Australia if you want to hear more about that.
I'm sure people. I mean, because it's a live conversation, and I think we do. I was writing the other day and said to someone, I was actually talking to someone who's quite high up in the English system and said, how much time do we spend looking at what's going on around the world? What time? So there's some really good stuff going on in other education systems, and sadly the answer was none. I'm too busy dealing with ours. And I
Yeah, we're
think
not even looking down the road, let
yeah,
alone overseas.
yeah, and we do need to take. I know, obviously, coming up to the summer and that
Hmm.
reflective time, it's worth taking the time just to say, well, let's just stop and think about what's being done elsewhere. So I'd encourage listeners and others just have that open mind to listen to what other people are doing and what they're learning, because it's not, as Bernie said, it's, we're all human beings and we have the same
Yeah.
chemistry and the same physiology, so we're working within the same parameters. So just take some time to think and listen, absorb, and learn from what is going on in other places. But
Hmm.
Bernie, I really appreciate the conversation. Is there anything you want to leave people with? Is there kind of a final word from what you've been doing or what you've learned?
I think I just leave you with, if you're a parent, then this is really for you as well.
Mm,
We could go back to the original text that Danny wrote, Loving Our Kids on Purpose. And this really is about how do we raise our children and how do we take them on the journey to be able to value a healthy relationship and value joyful responsibility. And when we can do that well, then we have the right conditions to create genuine restoration and connection. So we're no longer afraid of the messes, and we're no longer having to deal with our fear all the time, but we have a plan and we know what we're going to do with ourselves when our children's living life in front of us. And
mm.
so if I can just encourage you to pause long enough to think about what are your core beliefs and what do you want to believe, because you actually get to make a big part of determining the world that your child grows up in.
Yeah, absolutely. Bernie, thank you so much for the conversation this morning. It's been really important, and it can be transformative if people are willing to kind of engage. Please just stay online for a moment. I'm just going to do the conclusion, but stay where you are for a second. Thank you for being with us today. I appreciate Bernie Godwin and the book, Loving Our Students on Purpose, Bernie Godwin and Danny Silk. I'd love, Danny, if you're listening to this or you're involved at all, we'd love to have a conversation with you too, if you're able to. I know you're in the States rather than Bernie in Australia, but thanks for being here today. I will just say this is the summer month, so if you're looking for something from me and the work, there is still you have got access to the Efficient School, which is an ebook on Amazon. QR code is on the screen. If you haven't seen a copy yet, we don't go into the behavior issues here, but the shape of schools and the way that we do what we do. Please use the QR code and get your own copy if you haven't seen that so far. There's much more to follow. The second book should be out just in September, we hope. Now, thank you for being with us this morning. I know this has been recorded and not live, so we've not been able to respond to live comments. If you want to ask questions or you want to engage, please do so on YouTube or on LinkedIn or on any of the other platforms that we use, and get involved in the conversation. We value your input, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks for being here. Take care and have a great summer break.